My wife's older daughter is moving into our home permanently, and I refuse to subject my kids to her absent disrespect, so I filed for divorce. Now ex-wife is shocked. I refuse to sacrifice my bio kids to stay and fix her child. Hey Reddit, I don't usually post on here. I just scroll, read drama, and mind my business. But things at home went so sideways, I honestly didn't know where else to drop this. I've got 2 kids, 15 male and 13 female, from my late wife. My now ex has 3 kids. Her oldest is 16 female, from her ex-boyfriend, and then a 10 male and 7 female from her late husband. We were together 2 years before getting married, and married for 4. When we first got together, her oldest split time with her dad, so she wasn't always in the house. That made things a lot smoother because the younger 2 got along fine with my kids. We did the usual blended family stuff, Friday pizza nights, the kids playing Minecraft, movie marathons in the living room. My son would teach the little ones games. My daughter liked reading to them. Everything was okay at first. Small things started happening after a while. I'd notice a $20 bill missing from my glove box. Figured I spent it and forgot. Then, my daughter's new pack of scrunchies. Half gone. She thought she left them at a friend's house. Snacks would disappear faster than normal. But with 5 kids, that wasn't a big deal. Her oldest, I'll call her Kay, had a big personality. She wasn't shy, but she also had this way of making everything a challenge. Ask her to rinse a plate, she'd pause like deciding if it's worth it, then do it like it was an insult. She'd mock the younger ones when they got upset, then switch to acting nice if my wife walked in. My kids noticed, but nobody wanted to start drama. Relatives started mentioning things too. My wife's aunt said a perfume bottle went missing after Kay visited. Another said a bracelet wasn't where she left it. Everyone brushed it off with, "I must have misplaced it." Around the same time, Kay's dad would tell my wife about all these new things Kay bought because she was such a good saver. That didn't line up with what we saw. She'd spend any money she got right away unless someone stopped her. Over time, Kay got bolder. If I said no phones at the table, she'd keep hers face down by her plate and say, "It's on silent." She'd make little digs at my kids, call my son a nerd for caring about school, say my daughter's hobbies were baby stuff. She started taking things right before leaving to go back to her dad's. One time, it was parts from my son's Nintendo Switch. She had mentioned her own Switch at her dad's house had broken parts, so that was suspicious. We started quietly hiding stuff before visits. My daughter kept her sketchbook in my dresser drawer. My son took his games to a friend's house. Even the little ones would ask if they could hide their piggy banks. You could feel the tension the day before Kay arrived. I tried to handle it fairly. I made house rules. Phones charged in the kitchen by 9:30. No taking snacks without asking. Bedrooms are private. I told all the kids at the same time. The younger ones followed them. My kids followed them. Kay ignored them. I even offered to pay her for jobs like washing the car or organizing the garage so she could earn her own spending money. She did a couple half-heartedly, and then told my wife I was using her. Her dad got a job out of state about a year into our marriage and petitioned the court to take her with him. My wife fought it, but Kay said she wanted to go, and the judge let her. The court ordered her dad to pay for her visits to us. That's when things escalated. Every visit, stuff would go missing. My kids would lock their doors or hide things in their pillowcases. It wasn't just my kids, sometimes the younger 2 would notice their stuff gone too. I kept pointing it out to my wife, but she didn't want to believe it. She'd say maybe someone misplaced something or maybe the little ones took it. I knew it wasn't random. It was the same pattern every time. Visit starts, stuff disappears, visit ends, nobody can prove anything. That was the setup for everything else. By the time that she wants to live here, full-time conversation came up. My kids already wanted nothing to do with her. I had been watching the same problems get worse for years, and I knew where it was heading. The talk about Kay moving in full-time came during one of her summer visits. We'd been dealing with the same cycle for years. She'd come, tension went up, stuff went missing, she'd go back to her dad's, things relaxed. Then it would start over when she came again. My kids had their own ways of managing it. My son would basically disappear into his room when she was around. My daughter stayed in the kitchen or outside to avoid her. They never said much about it to me unless something specific happened, but I could tell they were counting down days until she left each time. This visit, Kay was hanging out in the living room one afternoon. I was outside mowing the lawn. When I came in, my wife was smiling like she had big news. She told me Kay wanted to live with us permanently. Her dad had apparently been talking about taking a different job that would keep him traveling a lot, and Kay said she'd rather stay here than be stuck with him gone all the time. My wife's reaction was instant. She said yes before I even processed it. She acted like it was a done deal. Kay looked happy about it. My wife was already talking about rearranging bedrooms and making it her space. I just stood there thinking about the last few years and how my kids were going to take it. I didn't hide my hesitation. I told my wife we needed to slow down and actually think about this. My exact words were, "We can't just bring her in full time without figuring out how to handle the issues we've had." She rolled her eyes and said, "We'll nip it in the bud now. It'll be better when she's here full time because she won't feel like a visitor." I'd already had enough conversations with relatives to know it wasn't going to be that simple. My wife's own family had made comments. Stuff like, "She's been like that since she was 7? I don't know how you'd fix it now." I agreed with them. This wasn't just a phase or a guest problem. It was her personality and habits, and full-time wasn't going to magically make her stop. I reminded my wife that my priority had to be my kids. They'd already had their stuff stolen, been insulted in their own house, and were walking on eggshells during visits. I wasn't going to force them to live like that every single day. She didn't like hearing that. She told me I had a duty to all 5 kids, not just my 2. The thing is, I do care about the younger 2. I've been in their lives for years. I've done school drop-offs, helped with homework, taken them to soccer and dance, but they aren't in danger of losing their stuff or being mocked by Kay. My kids were. And my wife's logic was basically stay, fix it, and parent her the same as the others. That might sound reasonable to someone who hasn't lived it, but you can't fix someone who doesn't think they're wrong and has no interest in changing. She asked me to at least talk to my kids about it. I told her we already knew how they felt, but fine, I'd ask. Later that night, I brought it up. My son immediately said he didn't want her living with us, and he brought up the switch incident again. My daughter said flat out that she didn't feel safe having her things around her. She didn't yell or get upset. She just said no. That was all the confirmation I needed. When I told my wife, she said we should work through it because her younger 2 couldn't lose me. I told her I wasn't disappearing from their lives, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my kids' comfort and security to make this happen. I even told her that if Kay moved in, I'd move out with my kids. I didn't say it to be dramatic. It was just the reality. That's when the guilt trip started. She said I was putting my kids over hers. I told her I was putting my kids over someone who repeatedly disrespected them, which is different. She said I was running away instead of fixing the problem. I told her we'd been dealing with this for years and nothing had changed, so there wasn't a fix coming. When Kay officially told her dad she wanted to move in, my wife acted like my concerns were just negative energy. She started buying things for Kay's new room before we'd even agreed on anything. It was like she thought if she moved fast enough, I'd just go along with it. That actually made my decision easier. I started looking at places for me and my kids. I kept it quiet until I found somewhere decent. Once I had the lease ready, I told her we were moving out. She said I was destroying the family and making the younger 2 lose another father figure. I told her again that I'd stay in their lives if she'd let me, but we weren't going to live with Kay full time. We moved out about 2 weeks later. My kids were relieved. My son unpacked his stuff in his new room and said, "Finally, I can leave my headphones on my desk." My daughter set up her art supplies without worrying about them disappearing. It wasn't a big place, but it was ours, and there wasn't a constant countdown to when someone would walk in and mess with their things. After we moved, my wife tried to get me to reconsider. She called, texted, even showed up at my place once. She kept saying, "We never really tried to work something out." I told her there was nothing to work out. I'd been clear for years about what I wouldn't put my kids through. She brought up the younger 2 again, saying they were suffering because both of their dads had left them. I told her that was unfair, and that their situation wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, Kay moved in full-time with her. From what I've heard, the same stuff is still happening. Other relatives have quietly mentioned things going missing. I don't gloat about it, but it's not surprising. You can't just ignore a problem for years and expect it to disappear. The younger 2 still see me sometimes. I pick them up, we do stuff together, I go to their games. My kids don't mind because it's not in our home, so the stress isn't there. It works fine like this. I filed for divorce about 2 weeks after moving out. She's still pushing for me to call it off and be a family again. I'm not doing that. I told her where my line was, she crossed it, and that's it. Filing for divorce was a straight line for me. No second guessing, no maybe if we just try. I'd already tried for years. I got a lawyer, explained the situation, and he didn't even blink. He said, "If you've moved out with the kids and she's pushing to bring someone into the home that's a threat to them, you're already doing the right thing." We started paperwork the same week. Of course, my ex didn't take it that way. The moment she got the papers, I started getting long texts, voice messages, and emails. Some of them were angry. "I can't believe you're doing this without even trying to fix it." And some were guilt trips. The little ones are crying every night and asking why you left. There was a pattern. Not once did she acknowledge Kay's behavior. Not once did she admit we had a real problem. It was all about how I was breaking up the family and how I should love all the kids equally. She started telling her side of the family her own version of events. I know because I got a couple of calls from her sister and one from her mother. Her sister said, "You can't just pick up and leave because of a teenager's attitude." I told her it wasn't about an attitude. It was about years of stealing, disrespect, and making my kids feel unsafe in their own home. Her response? That's just what teens do. At that point, I realized they weren't going to get it. Her mom took it further. She flat out told me I was selfish for prioritizing my kids over the whole family unit. I said, "Oh no, I'm prioritizing my kids over one person who's made life hell for them." That conversation ended quick. The one bright spot was my own family. My parents, my brother, they were 100% behind me. My dad actually said, "If you'd stayed, we'd have had to have a talk about what you were letting those kids go through." He doesn't sugarcoat. My mom kept reminding me that my kids had already lost their mom and didn't need more chaos. The younger two stepkids were the toughest part of this whole thing. They didn't do anything wrong. I'd been part of their lives since they were little, and I knew they'd take the separation hard. When I picked them up after we moved, they asked why we couldn't all just live together again. I told them the truth without going into every detail, that their sister and my kids didn't get along, and that it was better for everyone to live separately. They didn't like it, but they understood enough. My ex hated that I was still seeing them. She acted like if I was going to divorce her, I should cut ties completely so they could adjust. I told her flat out that wasn't happening unless the kids themselves told me they didn't want to see me. And guess what? They kept wanting to see me. Meanwhile, my kids were thriving in the new place. It's not big, but they have their own rooms. My son started leaving his laptop on his desk without worrying it'd disappear. My daughter started painting again and leaving her stuff out instead of locking it away. Small things, but they meant a lot. Kay, on the other hand, was apparently settling right into her new full-time situation with my ex. Within the first month, I heard from one of my wife's cousins that her younger two had started losing their toys and clothes. This cousin said, "I'm just saying, don't be surprised if she calls you complaining about it." I wasn't. About 6 weeks into the divorce process, my ex tried another tactic. She asked me to come over to talk about it for the kids' sake. I agreed, thinking maybe we could set boundaries for visits or figure out a smoother schedule for the younger two. Instead, she sat me down and said, "I think we should pause the divorce, give it 6 months, and see if you can learn to live with Kea." I told her no, point blank. She went into this speech about how real love is staying and working through challenges, how the younger two needed stability, and how my kids could learn tolerance. I told her my kids didn't need to learn tolerance for theft and disrespect in their own home. That's not a life skill. That's just enabling bad behavior. She didn't like that word, enabling, but that's exactly what she'd been doing for years. After that, she tried pulling the "you're abandoning them like their dads did" card again. I cut that short. I said, "No, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm protecting my kids. You had years to address this and chose not to. That's on you." Or from then on, most of our contact was through lawyers. That actually made things calmer. No more random calls or guilt texts at midnight. We stuck to schedules for the younger two, and I focused on my kids and my job. Still, word got around in the community. We live in a mid-sized town and people talk. I could tell when people had heard her version, because they'd give me that polite smile and ask, "How are you holding up?" I'd just say, "We're doing fine," and leave it at that. I wasn't going to run around defending myself to everyone. The people who mattered already knew the truth. One thing I noticed, my kids were more relaxed in general. My son started hanging out with friends at our place instead of always going to theirs. My daughter started baking again. The house just felt lighter. No one was checking their backpack to make sure stuff was still inside. No one was avoiding the living room. I don't regret moving out for a second. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner. The divorce process was moving along, my kids were happier, and even though the younger two missed us being under one roof, they were still part of our lives. That's as good as it was going to get. Once it sank in for my ex that I wasn't coming back, she changed her strategy. At first, it was all calls and texts about working it out and doing it for the kids. Then it turned into more subtle stuff, getting mutual friends involved, trying to plant the idea that I'd overreacted. It started with a guy from my work softball team. We've known each other for years, and his wife is friends with my ex. One afternoon after practice, he says, "Hey man, I heard things got rough at home. You sure you don't want to just give it another try? Kids grow out of this stuff." I just looked at him and said, "This isn't about growing out of it. It's about years of stealing and disrespect. My kids feel safe now. That's not something I gamble with." He didn't push after that, but other people did. A neighbor stopped me when I was unloading groceries and said she missed seeing all the kids together riding bikes in the street. I didn't bother explaining that half the time my kids wouldn't even go outside if Kay was visiting, because they didn't want to deal with her attitude or her grabbing their stuff. Then there was my ex's cousin, who cornered me at the hardware store. He said, "She's saying you walked out without warning." I told him, "I've been warning her for years. She just didn't listen." He nodded, but I could tell he was still going to report back whatever version she wanted to hear. Meanwhile, my lawyer was pushing the divorce forward. My ex wasn't contesting custody of my kids, they're mine 100%. But she kept trying to push for more family integration, meaning she wanted schedules that had my kids and her younger two together as much as possible. I didn't object to that in theory, but she also wanted Kay around during those times, which I flat out refused. That became a sticking point. I told my lawyer, "I'm not doing joint events with Kay there. My kids don't want it, and I'm not going to force it." He said as long as my kids' wishes were clear and documented, we could stand our ground. So that's what we did. Around this time, the younger two started talking more when they were at my place. They never said bad things about their sister directly, but they'd mention little stuff, like how their tablet went missing for a week before it suddenly showed up in her room, or how they had to hide snacks because she'd take them and deny it. It was the same pattern I'd seen for years. I never pressed them, but it was obvious they were dealing with the same problems now. About 3 months after we moved out, my ex called me out of the blue. Lawyer route was obviously slipping. She started with small talk. "How are the kids? How's work?" And then went right into, "They really miss you here." The younger two keep asking when you're coming over. I told them you're just being stubborn. I kept my voice calm and said, "I'm not being stubborn. I'm respecting boundaries. You know why I left?" She tried to twist it. "You left because you didn't want to put in the work. Families take work." I said, "I've been putting in the work for years. You've been ignoring the problem for years. That's the difference." She didn't like that. Next thing I know, she's telling me I've broken her trust and ruined our chance at being a blended family. I didn't even bother answering that one. The kids and I were busy with our own lives anyway. My son had joined the basketball team. My daughter was doing art competitions, and weekends were full. We had friends over, we went to the park, and we didn't have to check if our stuff was locked away. I could leave my wallet on the counter and know it'd still be there. But I kept hearing about trouble at her house. A friend of mine who works at the school told me Kay had been caught taking cash from another student's backpack. They didn't make it a huge incident, just school discipline. But the fact it was happening there too wasn't a shock. I didn't mention it to my ex because I knew she'd either deny it or say the school was overreacting. The last real push she made to get me back was about 4 months in. She asked me to meet her at a coffee shop to discuss the kids' holidays. I went, thinking it was about scheduling Christmas. Nope. It was her sitting there with a photo album, showing me pictures of our family from the last few years, and saying we owed it to them to fight for this. I let her finish. Then I said, "You're showing me pictures from years when my kids were hiding their favorite things before visits. Pictures from times they told me they didn't feel safe in their own home. I'm not going back to that." But she got mad and said I was her writing history. I told her, "No, I'm remembering it accurately. You just don't want to admit it." That meeting ended with her storming out and me paying for my own coffee. After that, she finally stopped trying to convince me. I think reality hit when she saw the divorce wasn't stalling, and that the younger two were still seeing me regularly without her being able to use it as leverage. By the time spring rolled around, my kids and I had a rhythm. School, activities, dinners together, weekends at the park, or working on projects at home. I fixed up old bikes for them, built a small garden in the backyard, and we got a dog. My son named him Max. The younger two would visit and play with Max too, and even though it wasn't the same as before, we still had fun. I made sure they knew they were welcome at our place anytime. The only difference now was that I could actually keep that promise without worrying about someone making life miserable for my kids. Looking back at that stretch of months, I realized something. Once the noise from her side died down, life got very quiet. No constant arguing, no locking up valuables, no tense dinners where someone was glaring across the table. Just peace. And that's worth more than any photo album or blended family speech could offer. By the time the new year hit, I'd stopped expecting any real drama from my ex. She wasn't texting me to come home anymore. She'd settled into the idea that I wasn't budging. Or at least, that's what I thought. Turns out, she'd just shifted gears. I got an email from my lawyer one Monday morning saying her attorney had filed a proposal to alter our custody agreement. Not over my kids, but over her two youngest. She wanted me to have joint step-parent responsibilities when they were with her. Basically, she was trying to sneak in a setup where I'd have to take her younger two at the same time as my own kids on my custody weekends. And, surprise, surprise, she wasn't excluding Kay from those visits. I called my lawyer right away and said, "No way, that's not happening." He laughed and said, "Don't worry, we're shutting it down. She can't force that kind of arrangement, especially after you've made it clear why you left." Still, it told me exactly where her head was, trying to backdoor her way into putting Kay back in my kids' lives. A week later, I ran into one of her neighbors while I was getting gas. This guy has always been friendly with me, but you could tell he was hesitant to bring it up. He said, "Hey, I don't want to get in the middle, but has Kay always been like that?" I asked him what he meant, and he said, "I've had stuff go missing from my garage. Nothing big, but tools, random things. Then I saw her with one of my old screwdrivers when she was helping wash their car. I told him it didn't surprise me. He just shook his head and said, 'Man, your kids are better off where they are.'" Word was starting to spread on its own now. I didn't have to say a thing. Meanwhile, my kids were settling into a life without the constant stress. About 2 months into the year, the younger two started saying more about what was happening at their moms. I never pried, but kids talk when they feel safe. They told me Kay had borrowed their stuff so often that they started hiding it under their beds. Even then, she'd dig around. One of them said they saw her take cash from their mom's purse and deny it when asked. I just listened and told them, "You know you're always safe here." Not long after that, my ex called me again, not to guilt me, but to ask for help. She said Kay had been caught shoplifting at the mall with a couple of friends. Security had called her in to pick her up, and now she was trying to figure out how to get her back on track. I kept my voice neutral and said, "You've had years to get her on track. I told you what would happen if you kept ignoring it." She got defensive instantly. "Don't act like you know everything. She's my daughter, I'll handle it." I just said, "Exactly. She's your daughter, handle it." It might sound cold, but I'd already been through every version of this conversation. Nothing I said was going to change her approach. Things with the divorce were moving along, but she was still dragging her feet on some paperwork. My lawyer said it wasn't enough to delay things for long, but it was obvious she was stalling. Probably because the longer the process took, the more chances she had to throw in some request to get me more involved with her kids again. Around March, she finally stopped trying to push Kay into my kids' lives. That's when the tone shifted. Instead of calling me stubborn, she started saying things like, "You're abandoning the younger two, and they don't deserve to lose you because of Kay." I'd always been clear with the younger ones. They could see me anytime, and nothing between their mom and me changed that. But I wasn't going to give my ex a way to use them as a bridge back into my home life. When they visited, we had a great time. We'd go to the park, play with the dog, do movie nights. But there was a line, and I wasn't crossing it. One weekend, I overheard the youngest telling my daughter that Kay had gone through her backpack when they were at their mom's and taken some markers she'd gotten for her birthday. The younger one said, "She told me she just needed them, but she's not giving them back." My daughter just said, "That's exactly why Dad won't let her here." And that was the end of it. No drama, no yelling, just matter-of-fact truth from a 13-year-old. By April, my lawyer had wrapped most of the case. We were waiting on one final hearing, and he told me it was basically just formalities at that point. That's when my ex made one last attempt to talk it out face to face. She showed up at my place unannounced. My son answered the door and called me over. She was standing there holding a couple of photo albums and this box of random stuff from our old house. Souvenirs from trips, birthday cards, that kind of thing. She said she thought I'd want to remember what we had. I didn't invite her in. I stood at the door and said, "I remember it fine. I also remember what ended it. This isn't going to change anything." She tried to pivot. "You're really going to throw away years because of one person's mistakes?" I said, "One person's mistakes that happened over and over for years, while you looked the other way?" "Yes." She left the box on the porch and walked off. Later, my daughter went through it and said, "You can tell she picked stuff to make you feel bad." I just shrugged and told her to keep anything she liked. The rest went into storage. Not long after, I started hearing from more people in her circle. A guy from her church reached out on Facebook and said he'd finally understood why I left. Apparently, Kay had been caught taking from the donation jar during an event. Another person told me she'd been banned from a neighbor's house because she took earbuds from one of their kids and lied about it. It wasn't about keeping score for me, but it did show me that my decision had been the right one. If my kids had still been there, they'd be in the middle of all that mess. By summer, the divorce was finalized, My ex didn't get what she wanted in terms of joint events or family integration. My custody of my kids stayed exactly the same. I had open visitation with the younger two when they wanted it, but nothing was forced. Kay was completely out of our lives, just like I'd said from day one. The funny thing is, once the legal part was over, the noise stopped almost completely. No more guilt trips, no more surprise visits. Just two separate households, each running their own way. At our place, life was simple. My ex? I heard through the grapevine that she was still trying to work with Kay, but most of the same issues were still there. Her problem was, now there was no one else to absorb the fallout. She was the only parent in that house, and she had to deal with everything herself. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be. I'd told her for years what was happening. She'd had years to address it. She didn't, and now she was living with the results. Meanwhile, my kids were happy, safe, and able to enjoy their own home without constantly looking over their shoulders. That's all I ever wanted. I figured the divorce was the end of it. We'd settled everything in court, the kids were safe, and I'd made it clear I didn't want Kay anywhere near them. For a while, it felt like things might actually stay that way. But my ex had one more card to play, and it was the one that crossed every line. It was a Friday night in late fall. My kids had just come back from their weekly dinner with her younger two. They'd met up at a pizza place near her house because I didn't want Kay anywhere in the picture. Everything seemed normal when they walked in, but about an hour later, both of them were doubled over in the bathroom. I figured maybe bad food, but it got bad fast. Vomiting, dizziness, and my son couldn't stand up without almost passing out. I rushed them to urgent care. The doctor asked if they'd eaten anything unusual. I told him it was just pizza and soda at a chain place. They ran some quick tests and found something in their systems that wasn't food-related. Traces of an over-the-counter sleep aid. Way more than a safe dose. Enough to make a grown adult drowsy for hours. For two kids, it could have been dangerous. The doctor asked if I wanted to file a report. I didn't even hesitate. I called the police from the waiting room. The first thing they did was go to the pizza place to check cameras. Turns out, my ex had shown up to say hi while they were eating with the younger two. She brought them drinks from the counter instead of letting them refill their own. They drank them. She left. The cops couldn't say why she'd do it, but I didn't need a motive. I can't prove it, but I believe she wanted to make them sleepy so she could take them to her place for the night without me knowing. Get them comfortable with Kay again. It was twisted and reckless. That night, my lawyer got an email from me with one line. File for an emergency protective order first thing Monday. By Tuesday, the court had approved it. The restraining order covered me and my kids, barred her from contacting us directly or indirectly, and blocked her from coming within 200 yards of our home, schools, or workplaces. It also limited her access to the younger two's events if my kids were there. The order didn't stop me from seeing the younger two. It just meant their mom couldn't be present during visits. We kept our time together separate from anything involving her or Kay. The fallout on her end was immediate. People she'd known for years stopped talking to her. The younger two's school put her on a monitored parent list, meaning any visits had to be approved and supervised. Word spread fast about what she'd done, and it wasn't the kind of rumor you could explain away. Kay's behavior didn't magically change either. If anything, it got worse without anyone to blame but her mom. Neighbors started keeping their kids away from their house, and she lost 2 babysitting gigs because parents didn't trust her. By winter, my ex's life was a mess. She'd lost a lot of friends. Her reputation was trashed, and she was scrambling to cover bills on one income. I didn't gloat about it, but I didn't lose sleep over it either. She'd made her choices. One afternoon, out of nowhere, I got an email from her. The subject line just said, "I'm sorry." The body was a long wall of text. She admitted to everything, blamed stress, said she never meant to hurt the kids, and claimed she was ready to start fresh as a better person. She asked if we could meet somewhere to talk it out. I didn't write a speech. I didn't explain myself. I typed one word, no. Then I closed the email, blocked her address, and went back to my day.